The Night Courier, a single-event Revolutionary War thriller. Philadelphia, autumn 1777. Philadelphia had learned to whisper. Since the British took the city, lamplight floated like nervous stars above streets that smelled of rain, soot, and bayonet oil. Taverns spoke in vowels, shutters blinked like wary eyelids. And in an alley off Chestnut Street, a man named Elias Turner pressed his back to cold brick and counted his heartbeats. He held a folded letter, wax still warm, the wax stamped with a simple crest and no grand seal, nothing that shouted credence. That was the point. The words inside came from the commander himself. If read at the right fire, they would move regiments like chessmen and keep the Delaware crossings in American hands. If read in the wrong fire, they would end men. A door opened behind him. Margaret Hale, a seamstress by daylight and a knotted string in the Patriot web by night, stepped out with a candle cupped in her palm. She had needle-calloused fingers and a face that refused panic the way a stone refuses ink. "They're sweeping market," she whispered. "Redcoats and dragoons, both. You leave now or you don't leave." Elias nodded. "The Schuylkill bridges are watched." "Then don't take a bridge." She pressed a small brass compass into his hand. Its lid showed a scratched star and a hairline crack. Quaker Farm on the Mill Road. Willow at the river. Flatboat under it. Tell the boy you rode by me. He slid the compass into his coat. "If I'm taken now." "You won't be," she cut in. "But if you are, burn the letter first and your name next." He almost smiled. "And you?" "I've already burned mine." "Go." He went. 1. The alley and the press. Philadelphia's streets were a geometry of risk, long avenues where patrols paraded, narrow courts where secrets pooled. Elias cut through a courtyard that smelled of pitch and damp rope, past a shuttered printing shop where yesterday's broadsides still slept on the rack. He felt the city's breath around him, the living warmth of bodies indoors, the cold attention of soldiers outdoors. At 2nd Street a redcoat stepped into view, musket leveled. "Hold there, you." Elias didn't. He threw himself left, vaulted a barrel, splashed through a rivulet of rain. A second soldier cursed and gave chase. Boots rang on stone. Somewhere a dog barked like a drum. Elias slipped through a tailor's side gate and burst into a yard littered with barrel hoops and staves. He ducked behind a stack of seasoned oak. The soldiers pounded past, one lantern swinging, making the yard a strobe of light and shadow. When the steps faded, he moved. He moved the way a thought moves, without sound. North and west, then west again, then south a little, because straight lines were for parades and coffins. 2. The Quaker farm. The city thinned, the land opened its hands. A hedge of hawthorn marked the Quaker property, and beyond it a barn loomed against the moon. He heard a horse blow softly inside, patient as an old priest. Downslope, the river kept its counsel under a skin of silver. The willow was exactly where Margaret had promised the one dependable adjective in a night full of slippery ones. A flat skiff sulked under its trailing branches. A boy crouched near it, freckles pale under moonlight, hair a-tumble astraw. "You last, Turner?" the boy asked. "I am." "Then we're square." He pushed the skiff with a grunt. "Name's Nate." "Does the river run quiet?" "Quiet enough to hear lies." They shoved off. The current took them like a polite thief. Nate rode with the awkward strength of 15 years and hunger. Halfway across, a spark leapt on the far bank, then the crack of a musket. A bullet slapped water inches from a lass's hand. Another hissed past his ear like an angry bee. "Down," Elias said. "Already am," Nate muttered, flattening to the bench while still sawing at the oars. The skiff slewed. Another shot split the stern plank. A cold finger of water touched Elias's boot. "Hold her," Elias said, and dropped the compass into his mouth to free his hands. He ripped his coat, jammed the torn wool against the splinter, and pressed. The leak turned sulky rather than eager. They reached the shadow of the far bank, branches overhanging like a conspirator's beard. Nate hooked the skiff and breathed again. "You owe Margaret more than I can count." "I already do," Elias said, spitting the compass into his palm and snapping the lid shut with his thumb. The needle quivered, then steadied, not at north so much as at the hunger cooled away. 3. The mill road. They climbed the mud slope, leaves cold and slick. The mill road stretched pale in the moonlight, an unwound ribbon over low hills. Elias took it at a trot, then slowed, then stopped altogether when he heard hooves. He dropped into the ditch, into a tangle of blackberry and old water. The hooves came on our loyalist dragoons by the jangle, not British regulars. Drunk on local knowledge and borrowed power, they swept past with torches flicking. One torch fell a tongue of flame onto the road and then died in its own hiss. When the glow had gone, Elias rose, pricked with thorns and patience. He walked more than he ran now, feeling his boots talk to his bones. The landscape learned his weight, he learned its undulations, a fence line, then copse, then low stone wall, then pasture scarred by wagon ruts. He kept the river to his left until he needed it at his back. From the woods came another sound, the memory of a psalm. A quiet voice. A Quaker voice. He followed it to a low farmhouse where a single candle burned behind horn-pane windows. A man in plain dress stood by the door, hands folded like the rest of him. "You'll be wanting bread," the Quaker said. "I'll be wanting silence more," Elias answered. The man nodded. "Bread won't argue." He opened the door. Inside, a woman set a loaf and a crock of butter on the table without commentary. Elias sat like someone remembering a language. The woman set a tin of ash beside the hearth. "For burning what must be burned," she said. "If soldiers come, we're not visited so much as inspected." Elias touched the letter in his coat. "I hope not to use it." "Hope is a kindling," she replied. "It burns easiest." He thanked them and left, belly warmed, pockets no heavier, heart steadier. The night had marched while he chewed, stars were fewer, the Easter hint less black. For the toll house, the road ran to a toll house where a single lantern dozed. A man in Storia Ezekiel bike, the keeper wore sleep like a hat. He peered through the window when Elias rapped. Closed. "I can pay." "You can, but I can't open without the sergeant seeing, and the sergeant likes rules even more than he likes his own voice." "Where is he?" Relieving himself of both. The keeper tilted his head toward the latrine out back. "Move like a shadow and you could be a rumor by the time his trousers remember their duty." Elias smiled despite himself. "Lift the bar on your side. I'll see to the rest." He stepped off the plank walk into the grass and became small. He became darkness threaded with patience. At the latrine, he heard a man humming a marching tune with the key misplaced and the tempo drunk. Elias waited until the tune ended on a sigh. Then he slid past. The toll bar raised with a wooden groan that could have been a night bird if anyone wanted it to be. Elias slipped through and set the bar down again as gently as a lullaby. "God grant you happenstance," the keeper whispered through the wood. "God grant you boredom," Elias whispered back. 5. The checkpoint. He had a mile of open lane ahead when Providence decided to test its investment. 4 soldiers appeared where the lane bent around a stand of cedar. 2 redcoats, 2 local militia wearing green twigs in their hats as if the forest were a uniform. Their lantern wrote a circle on the road and their muskets wrote straight lines. "Halt," one said. "Names and business." Elias wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing mud without erasing fatigue. "Thomas Gray," he said, offering a name he'd used often enough to half-own. "Tallow and soap for the hospitals at Germantown." "Your papers." Elias produced a folded manifest, already sweated soft, bearing Margaret Hale's steady counterfeit hand and a quartermaster's forgery that had not yet been tested publicly. The nearest redcoat held the paper to the lantern and pursed his lips as if he might kiss suspicion or blow on it. "Open your coat," the man said. Elias did. Inside were a block of tallow, a bundle of soap, and a Bible whose interior cavity held nothing at the moment but air and nerve. The letter was pressed to Elias's ribs under a strip of linen, skin sticking to wax. A twig-hatted militiaman took the Bible and flipped it. "Heavy book for a light hour." "Words weigh more in war," Elias said. "I'll drink to that when drink is near." The man handed the Bible back and loosened. "Move along." The redcoat with the lantern did not loosen. "Let him wait." "Doc's orders." He wrapped the tallow. "Why's the soap scented like lemon?" "Soldiers don't need lemon." "It's for officers," Elias said evenly. "They like to stink politely." The soldiers' laughed, the kind of laugh that can be misdirected. In the laughter's echo, another voice came, crisp, clipped, wearing a riding crop like punctuation. "What have we?" A captain on a high horse rode into the lantern pool. He had neat boots, a neat face, and the neat contempt of someone who'd inherited it. "Papers," he said again, though they were already in his man's hand. He read them and made a face like a tutor forced to teach arithmetic to a wall. "Open the Bible," he said. Elias did. The hollow smelled of glue and ingenuity. The captain ran a finger around its edge, then sniffed. "Hate books," he said lightly, and snapped it shut. "On your way, Mr. Gray. And try not to wash the war away. Our boys need something to remember." Elias nodded, pulse in his teeth. When he was 10 paces past, the captain called out, "One more thing." Elias turned. "Your boots," the captain said. "They're continental issue. They were a gift. War is generous that way." He let Elias go. They always did until they didn't. 6. The ambush at Cobb's Hill past midnight. The road climbed Cobb's Hill, where scrub and rock made cover for men who preferred shooting to marching. Elias felt the prickle between his shoulder blades that came with being watched. He left the road without leaving noise, cut along the slope, and paused behind a sycamore whose bark peeled like old paint. Below, the road whispered to itself. Then came Shapee's loyalist skirmishers, 3 of them, wearing homespun that didn't ask permission. They moved like men who knew the hill in childhood. 1 took point, 1 hovered left, 1 lagged, all 3 carrying muskets as if they might hail a friend or ruin him with the same gesture. Elias needed to pass without making a new story for their children. He took a smooth stone from the dirt and threw it into brush 20 yards to his right. Dry branches cracked like a sentence. The skirmishers pivoted. The lagger went aground. The point man hissed. "Deer." "Or rebel," the other said. "Then it's a deer who owes taxes," the first replied, and they laughed without humor. They crept toward the sound that wasn't Elias. While they crept, Elias ghosted across the path they'd left and became an absence on the other side. At the top of Cobb's Hill, the night inhaled. Wind poured over him cold from the northwest. He tasted rain in it and the distant iron of coming day. 7. The bridge you don't cross. The King's Bridge over a narrow run was guarded. It would be. Elias stopped 50 yards short and listened. Voices and the sound of boots stamping warm. A tin cup clinked against a tooth. He studied the dark like a map. The stream ran shallow this time of year but loud over stones. Downstream, a fallen tree made its own bridge where the current had chewed the bank. He went to it. The bark was slick with moss. He sat, swung his legs across, and then lay on his belly and inched. Halfway, a branch snapped. A soldier at the real bridge snorted. "Hear that?" "Raccoon," came the reply. "I hate raccoons." "You hate everything. Especially raccoons." While they built a philosophy around their hatreds, Elias finished the crossing and slipped into weeds that smelled of mint and cold. 8. The farmer dawned toward the far hills. The east pale not light yet, but the color light would be if you pared it to the bone. His legs quaked with a fatigue that planned to be permanent if given the chance. He told them number. The continental outposts would be just beyond the pastures, at the edge of woods near White Marsh. He cut across a field toward a farmhouse where smoke rose thin from a reluctant chimney. A woman stood on the stoop in stockings, hair braided and tied, no cap yet, no public face. She watched him with the squint of someone who counted eggs and bullets with the same care. "My husband's away with the forage wagons," she said before he could speak. "If you're selling, we pay nothing. If you're buying, we have less." "I'm neither. I need the yard and a bucket." "Then you'll pay in news. You smell of it." She handed him a bucket and pointed to the pump. He splashed his face and hands, rubbed mud to make cleanliness from cousins. The woman's little boy stared from behind her skirt with the solemnity children bring to any war. "News?" she prompted. "The general still holds," Elias said. "And we still have a country. Both things change daily." "That's worth coffee," she said, and gave him a tin cup so thin it made water sing. He drank and almost wept. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Bring an end when you can." "I'm trying." He gave the boy the compass to hold for a moment. The child's eyes widened. "It tells where we are?" "No," Elias said softly. "It tells where we're going if we keep moving." The boy nodded as if that matched what he'd suspected of the world. 9. The American line beyond the farm. 2 sentries in blue coats and mismatched shoes raised muskets and then their eyebrows when they saw Elias's state. "Friend?" one asked. "If I'm not, I'm the worst spy in Pennsylvania," Elias said, and lifted empty hands. They walked in between pickets to a cluster of tents where the earth had learned the shape of men. Fires sparked without roaring, men talked without proclaiming. Someone's cough wrote its own grim ledger. The flag hung limp, waiting for wind, patient as a promise that refuses spectacle. An officer with ink-stained fingers met him. Name: Elias Turner. What do you bring? An order, not mine. Elias reached inside his coat, under linen, under skin almost, and drew the letter. The wax had cracked at one edge, but the impression held. He placed it in the officer's hand with the care of a midwife. The officer slid it into his jacket. "Come." They threaded the camp to a tent whose ridgepole wore the weight of more decisions than any piece of wood should. Inside, a map sprawled on a table like a patient under a sheet. A tall man stood over it with a jaw that looked less like authority than like endurance. George Washington lifted his head when Elias entered. The general's eyes were grey in the way of a sky that chooses its weather. "From Philadelphia?" Washington asked. "Yes, sir." "You met no delays?" 1,000. "None successful." Washington's mouth moved half an inch. Approval, perhaps, or fatigue's smile. He took the letter, broke the wax, read. The silence inside the tent wasn't empty, it was crowded with the futures each sentence suggested. At length, he laid the paper on the map and set his hand on both, as if joining artery to artery. "We move the pickets here," he said to the aide. "We hold the crossings until moonrise and we do not waste men on flare. Colonel Morgan is to be informed quietly. And someone finds von Steuben and explains he will have men to drill who still have feet." "Yes, sir," the aide said, and vanished. Washington looked back at Elias. "You've done a difficult thing. I was helped by many who will never be named. That's usually how a republic is built," Washington said. The line softened again at his mouth. "You're bleeding through your right boot." "I was hoping that was merely character. We need men with character who can still walk." "Sit." Washington poured coffee so strong it might have stood on its own. "Tell me the city's temperature." "Hot with fear. Cooling into compliance. But embers are everywhere." "Then we will be the weather that makes use of embers." Elias drank. The cup rattled in his hands only a little. The coffee rewired him from the inside. Outside the tent, a drum began to roll a morning call, though morning was only a rumor trying to convince itself. Washington folded the letter once, twice, then slid it into his coat as if sheathing a blade. "Rest an hour," he said. "Then I'll send you back with answering ink." Elias blinked. "Back, sir?" "Back," the general repeated without malice. "Only the road that carries news in one direction is a road men learn to block. Will use the same path while they're still congratulating themselves for missing you." Elias found a breath he hadn't known he was saving and let it go. "Yes, sir." Washington extended his hand. Elias took it. The general's grip was firm without performance. "Mr. Turner," Washington said, "it is not north you need, it is forward." Elias smiled. "I've heard that said. Good advice travels faster than armies." He left the tent to the slow efficiency of a camp that had made endurance its capital. He sat on a log, loosened his right boot, and found the blood not mortal and the blister absolutely convinced of its own importance. The sky lightened by degrees, fog lifted from the pastures and went to be cloud elsewhere. Men laughed at something small, someone sang off-key, a horse threw its head and reminded the world of muscle. Elias took the compass out and opened it. The needle trembled, then settled not quite at north. He didn't need it to. He knew the way. Forward had a face now, a nicks and scars and the human temperature of work. He closed the lid and felt it click of the sound of two halves agreeing. He slept sitting up for 13 minutes and woke to an aide's shadow. Orders. Elias stood, took the new letter, and tucked it exactly where the last had lived. "Same road?" he asked. "Same road," the aide said. "Different luck, we hope." "Luck is a militia," Elias said. "It shows up when it wants." He tightened his boot, squared the weight of the day, and began to walk. The camp opened a path for him without ceremony. The flag was waking. The sun finally put a hand on the edge of the world and levered it up. The Night Courier became the morning one. And the road, already written by his feet, waited to be written again. The Night Courier A Part 2, The Return Road 10, the morning march. The frost was still clinging to the grass when Elias tightened his bootlaces and stepped beyond the continental picket lines. The sun had risen, but its warmth hadn't yet learned how to travel. The new letter sat under the same strip of linen, pressed to his ribs as the last one had been. He told himself the road was the same, but it felt different now, brighter in spots, darker in others. Every hedge and hollow looked like an unfinished thought. Two privates from the picket line called after him. "Private, going back the way you came?" Elias, "Same road, different trouble." "Private, that's the truth of every road." They watched him until the fog swallowed him. 11. The shadow at Cobb's Hill. Cobb's Hill was quieter in daylight, but quiet could be camouflaged. Elias walked in the ditch, eyes on the sycamore bark peeling in slow curls. Halfway down, movement flickered in the corner of his eye, not an animal's quick dart, but a human's patient wait. He kept walking as if he hadn't seen, loosening the knife in his belt. A man stepped out, homespun jacket, musket in hand. Two more behind him, the same trio from the night before. Loyalist skirmishers. Skirmisher, road tax. Pay in coin or news. Elias, all I've got is soap and tallow for the Germantown hospitals. Skirmisher, and a face worth remembering. They circled. Elias could feel the letter heating under his shirt. He knew if they searched him too thoroughly, the war would shrink by one man. From above, a hawk cried. All three skirmishers looked up for the fraction of a second it takes to live or die. Elias threw his knife, not to kill but to startle. The blade buried itself in a stump. He used the opening to slide between the two rearmost men and run, feet hammering the slope. Shouts followed. Shots cracked. Bark exploded from a tree near his ear. 12. The mill road trap, breath tearing in his throat. Elias hit the mill road and slowed just enough to look casual. Two redcoats were walking toward him, muskets on their shoulders, chatting idly about rations. Behind him, the loyalists would be closing in. He took the risk. Elias, morning, lads. Any trouble on the road? Redcoat 1, not unless you count boredom. Elias, better that than musket fire. The redcoats laughed. The moment they passed, Elias slipped through a hedgerow into a muddy pasture. Behind him, loyalist voices hit the redcoats. Confusion bought him minutes, say minutes were gold. 13. Germantown smoke. By noon, the air thickened. Not fog-gay smoke. In the distance, the low boom of cannon rolled through the hills. Elias climbed a fence and saw it, Germantown. Streets blurred with gunpowder haze, musket lines vanishing in and out of the white like ghosts. The British were pressing, but the Continentals had teeth here. He knew going through was suicide. But the long way around was hours, and he had no hours. 14. Street of the Dead Rooster. He slid into town along a narrow back lane, stepping over a dead rooster whose feathers were still drifting in the air. The lane opened onto a courtyard where a single wagon stood, canvas flapping. From the shadows came a voice he knew. Margaret, you're late. Elias, you didn't tell me there'd be a war in my shortcut. Margaret, there's always a war in your shortcut. She stepped out, hair tied back, hands black with soot. Margaret, the north road's blocked. Dragoons have the toll house and the bridge. You'll need to go through Market Street. Elias, that's a parade ground for redcoats. Margaret, then don't walk. Hide. She pulled back the wagon canvas. Inside, barrels of flour array and a narrow crawl space. Elias climbed in, the smell of wheat and damp wood closing around him. Margaret dropped the flap. Wheels creaked, and the wagon rolled. Through the wood slats, Elias caught flashes of sunlight, boots, shadows. Voices stopped the wagon twice. Margaret's tone turned sharp and scolding, a perfect act of an annoyed supplier delayed by fools. The guards waved her through. 15. The tavern incident at the far edge of the market. She stopped in an alley. Elias rolled out from under the canvas. Margaret, you're clear to the alley by Dock Creek. After that, you're on your own. Elias, you've saved me twice now. Margaret, you'll pay me back when this is over. Elias, with what? Margaret, silence. She vanished into the smoke. Elias made it to Dock Creek without incident, but just as he reached the tavern corner, a familiar voice cut the air. Captain with riding crop, Mr. Gray. Elias turned. The British captain from the checkpoint stood there, boots still immaculate. Captain, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about you. And your boots. 16. The chase. Elias didn't wait for an invitation. He ran. The captain shouted. 2 soldiers appeared from the tavern, giving chase. He cut through the tavern's rear door, scattering mugs and curses, out into a yard full of laundry lines. Sheets slapped his face as he barreled through. The soldiers tangled, swearing. Elias vaulted a fence, landed hard, and rolled. Down the next street, he spotted a cooper's shop, the same one from the night before. He ducked inside. The cooper, a giant of a man with arms like tree trunks, looked up. Cooper, back again? Elias, they want my boots. I'd like to keep my feet in them. Without a word, the cooper tipped a barrel sideways. Cooper, inside. Elias climbed in. The cooper rolled the barrel to the back wall just as Boots stormed in. Captain, you see a man in a brown coat? Cooper, plenty of men in brown coats. This is Philadelphia. The search ended with curses. When the coast was clear, the cooper tipped the barrel. Elias, oh, you won. Cooper, you owe me 2. Now get out before they come back with brains. 17. The river escape from Duck Creek. He reached the wharf. A fishing sloop was untying, sails slack in the breeze. Elias shouted. Elias, I'll pay double for a mile downriver. Fisherman, you don't look like a man with double. Elias, I look like a man who won't argue with the price. They pulled him aboard. The sails caught wind. The city began to shrink. On the far bank, the fisherman dropped him in reeds. Fisherman, that's as far as I go. The river has ears. Elias trudged through the reeds, compass warm in his palm, the letter still safe. 18. Returned to the farm by dusk, he reached the Quaker farm again. The boy Nate was splitting kindling. Nate, back so soon? Elias, the road runs both ways. Nate, this one runs trouble both ways, too. The boy hid the skiff under the willow. Elias knew he would row again that night, but the danger wasn't over. Somewhere behind them, hooves echoed faintly. Elias, tell your sister Margaret I still have my boots. Nate, she'll be thrilled. Elias crossed the river again under darkness, slipping into the city's belly with the British none the wiser Rafer now. The Night Courier Part 3, The Last Mile. 19. The city's throat. Philadelphia at night was a different predator than in the morning. The streets no longer bustled, they lurked. Torches bled light across door frames. Patrols moved in slow sweeps, like cats dragging their tails. Elias kept to the shadows, compass in hand, heading for the safe house on Black Horse Alley. The letter felt heavier now, as if the paper had absorbed the weight of the miles, the gunpowder smoke, the near misses. A bell rang out from Christchurch. 9 times. That meant the East Patrol would be turning toward the docks, which meant the West Patrol, the one he feared, would be heading right for him. 20. The trap on Elfreth Sally. Elfreth Sally was narrow enough that 2 men could shake hands from opposite windows. Elias was halfway through when boots closed in from both ends. Lantern lights spilled, painting the brick walls gold and black. The captain with the riding crop stepped into view at the south end, smile sharp as a bayonet. Captain, no more running, Mr. Gray. Let's see what's in that fine coat of yours. From the north end, 2 dragoons advanced, their shadows stretching like they wanted to get to him first. 21. The window gambit. Elias glanced up. Laundry lines again, shirts swaying like ghosts. Above them, an open window with candlelight spilling. A voice called softly from the dark above. "Margaret, up here." No time to argue. He backed toward the wall as the captain advanced, then sprang, grabbed the line, and hauled himself up. Shirts tore wood scraped his knuckles, boots slipped on the sill, but Margaret's hand grabbed his sleeve and yanked him inside. 22. The rooftop flight. "Margaret, you lead soldiers to my door again and I'll start charging you rent." "Elias, only if it comes with breakfast." She shoved him toward a back room where a ladder led to the roof. Outside, the night air hit his face like a thrown bucket. He crawled up the tiles, boots scrabbling for grip. Shouts rose in the alley. The captain's voice barked orders. Elias crossed 2 rooftops, chimney to chimney, until he reached a gap. Across it, the neighboring roof sagged low, easy to drop to. He jumped, landed, rolled, kept moving. 23. The Black Horse Alley safe house. The safe house door was marked by a single horseshoe nailed upside down, a signal known only to patriots in the city. He knocked twice, paused, then once. The door opened to reveal a gaunt man with ink-stained fingers and eyes like sharpened slate. "Safe house keeper, letter?" Elias handed it over without ceremony. The man broke the seal, scanned the contents, and nodded once. "Safe house keeper, Washington's answer. We'll have the powder moved before morning." Elias leaned against the wall, letting his lungs remember how to work. 24. The captain's last play from outside, the sound of boots again, a fast, angry. The captain's voice was unmistakable. "Captain, search every door." "He's here." The keeper shoved Elias toward a trapdoor in the floor. "Safe house keeper, cellar." Out through the rain channel. It was a tunnel barely high enough to crawl through, ending in a gutter that spilled into Dock Creek. The smell was foul, the water colder than betrayal. But it put 30 yards of brick between him and the captain. 25. The river. Goodbye. Elias followed the creek toward the open river. The tide was coming in. The dark water folded over itself. Somewhere upstream, the captain would be cursing the city's rabbit warren of escape routes. He pulled the compass from his coat, opened the lid. The needle quivered, not quite pointing north. Margaret's voice came back to him. "It's not north you need. It's forward." He closed the lid. 26. Forward. By dawn, he was outside the city, boots muddy, coat torn, letter delivered, and a little more of himself spent than he'd planned. The road stretched ahead in grey silence. For a moment, he let himself believe it that maybe this war could be won not just by armies and cannon,